Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of The Contrarian. I am delighted to welcome two former federal prosecutors, Daniel Toomey and Charles Work. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. We're glad to
You
be
too.
here.
There's been a lot of talk about Ed Martin, this fellow that was lacking in any prosecutorial experience and was appointed to perhaps the most important U.S. Attorney's office in the country, which was the District of Columbia. His nomination has kind of been maybe put on hold, at least temporarily. So I wanted to talk to two experienced prosecutors who served in that office a little bit about what a prosecutor should and shouldn't do. Daniel, what does a U.S. attorney do? What's their
Well,
role?
a U.S. attorney in the D.C. office is kind of in a unique position. Um, there are U.S. attorneys all over the United States. Their role, other than in D.C., is limited essentially to the investigation and prosecution of federal crimes.
Right.
The D.C. U.S. attorney is not only that, he's also the local DA. uh, and acts like a DA. And I would say, and I don't think Chuck would disagree with me, over the years, that has probably been the more significant role that he plays. Um, over 50 years since we've been out of that office, we have known many U.S. attorneys who have gone through and who are retired, many of whom are on our statement, over 100 of us. And the what we never suffered from was any kind of political interference with what we were doing, regardless. In fact, really, during the time we were in the office, and I suspect it was the same with others who followed us, we oftentimes didn't know what the political affiliation was of any other prosecutor. We simply did our jobs. If there was if there were facts that needed to be investigated, we'd investigate them. If the facts were sufficient, there was sufficient facts to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, we'd indict, and then we'd try them. And by the way, we had a enviable record of prosecuting both uh, Republican and Democratic politicians throughout. Um, uh, Enviable because virtually in almost every case we got convictions. And oftentimes there would be a Democratic U.S. attorney and a Democratic politician.
Right.
Uh, in fact, you may remember years ago when Chuck and I were there, Senator Brewster from Maryland was prosecuted, and the U.S. attorney who was there at the time, as I recall, was Tom Flannery. No, I'm sorry, it was David Bress, who was democratically appointed. Chuck?
Right. Right. Charles, when Daniel says that he's also the district attorney, that's because the District of Columbia is not a state. They don't have a local DA who prosecutes at least criminal felonies. So that person is going to do murder cases and is going to do things that would ordinarily be a violation of state law. But they also have this role in terms of politics. When you were there, did you ever refer to yourself, as Ed Martin did, as the president's lawyer? Did you send letters to either individuals or to organizations like Wikipedia wasn't invented then, but publications or Democratic politicians wanting to investigate them or wanting to take a partisan position with them? Was that anything like what when you were there?
No, no, not at all. And I think that if you look at U.S. attorneys all across the country, none of them would dream of doing that. There are guardrails. There are guardrails that this person, Ed Martin, has ignored in the rather short period of time that he has been the interim U.S. attorney. He has been all over the road improperly. And
Yes.
that's just one of the reasons, just one of the reasons that 100 of us, more than 100 of us, former assistants in that office have come together to fight this nomination. This is very unusual. We don't do this. We're not politically active types of people. None of us are. And none of us were appointed to this job with political credentials in mind. In fact, if you were out in Kansas or Arizona, the person appointed would have probably some political connections. And it would be an honor to be the job, but it would always be a significant, distinguished local practitioner. And that's been entirely the record here in DC. We have never had a U.S. attorney who hasn't either been a judge or been a prosecutor or have had a distinguished local career as a lawyer.
Let me just amplify that
Wait.
a little bit. We didn't know this at the time, but Ed Martin, in his responses to the questionnaire from the Senate Judiciary Committee, has acknowledged that he has never tried a civil or criminal case to verdict. He is not a trial lawyer.
And that, of course, is the principal job of a U.S. attorney. Obviously, he or she will have a fleet of other lawyers, but principally, you have to know what is a case, what's not a case, what is something that you could reasonably hope to get a indictment from a grand jury and so on. So it's sort of like hiring someone to be a doctor who's never seen a patient or never operated on one.
Well, there's a good example of that. Early on in his career, he importuned a 24-year veteran of the U.S. Attorney's Office. Her name was Chung. He wanted to stop certain grants that were being made environmentally.
This is while he's during his interim period.
This is in this last 3 months. And
Right.
he said, I want to get a grand jury subpoena so that we can get their documents so that we can say to the banks that were holding the funds that would be distributed, that were allocated by the Congress. And she looked at this and she said, look, there are not sufficient facts to presume there may have been a crime committed. He asked for a resignation. She gave her resignation. He then took it upon himself to go to a federal magistrate, signing his own affidavit. And the federal magistrate, not unusually, because it's so rare that any U.S. attorney would go without facts, and said, I can't grant this because you don't have any facts.
Right.
I mean, that's the level of competence that he showed.
Right.
One very recent further piece of evidence about his disqualification came out in an NPR story in quite a lot of detail yesterday, talking about his connections with this Nazi sympathizer. And that by itself should be disqualifying. But and the relationships were extensive. He has tried to minimize them. Actually, in my view, lied about his connections and his knowledge of this Nazi supervisor's activities. And I feel that by itself, to say nothing of a couple of other strange things that happened internationally, had 150 appearances on this Russian propaganda machine.
RT and Sputnik.
We really can't believe that this person would be considered by anyone to be even thought of as a candidate for United States attorney, much less any other significant job in any administration. So we're working very hard to get the attention of the Senate Judiciary Committee. We've been meeting with members of the committees and their staffs, and we've been trying to persuade them that this is a gigantic mistake. It will really tear apart the U.S. attorneys. Now, there are about 300 lawyers down there. This is not a small office. It will tear that office apart. It will put it down in flames. This is truly an important step by the Judiciary Committee, and it must turn him down.
Absolutely.
Jennifer, not to interrupt, but we read recent articles that some of the GOP members are concerned about this, and they talk about they're going to sit down with Ed and trying to get answers to straighten this out. Well, he has not told them the truth. He hid the truth. This information all came to the fore because of the press. What are they going to say? You know, are you going to tell us the next time you're cozying up to an anti-Semite? And what is he going to say? Well, no, I won't do it again. This is also the same person. Now, every one of these senators, except a couple that have just been just elected and appointed this committee, every one of them was there on January 6th. Ed Martin avowedly says that January 6th did not occur. He referred to it as a Mardi Gras. He was on the grounds.
And he was on the grounds.
Yes, yes. Well, I think what we are seeing is exactly what the Republicans have invaded against, which is the politicization of the entire justice system. And I have to stress, the federal judges are not patsies, and they have begun to recognize, not only in DC, but around the country, that when a prosecutor comes in, does not have the facts, does not have the law, can't even explain the government's position, they will not go along with this. So in some respect, if Republicans want to have successful litigation in federal courts, they would be well advised to get people who are credible, who are believable, who know how to litigate cases, because if not, they're going to be embarrassed over and over again. Well, I commend you, gentlemen, for what you've done. It's been a tremendous public service. As you have said, I have never heard of this occurring before, because these are usually very non-controversial kind of positions. You want to get the best of the best. And so we will come back to you, Daniel and Charles, in the future. And hopefully this nomination will be dead as a doorpost, because if it's not, I think we'll all be the worse for wear. So thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.